I didn't get that, sorry.
The fact that the returning officer cancelled the elections in those 3 local governments and then had to reverse himself because he didn't have the powers to cancel the election, only the tribunal can, doesn't that show enough red flag in the first instance?
It does. It does. Once votes have been casted, except where you find cases of overvoting, the returning officer has no power whatsoever under the Constitution or under the Electoral Act to cancel any results. The issue of cancellation at that stage becomes that of an election petition tribunal, because INEC cannot usurp the powers of an election petition tribunal. Each of them have their own functions. The function of INEC under Section 2 is to simply hold elections, referendum, do voter education and all that. But once there's a dispute as to how results have been cancelled, cast, whether there was overvoting, whether there was not, has to now be a matter for the election petition tribunal. That also is a very grave issue that has to be looked into.
So if I get you very clearly, Chief, what you're saying is that the grounds upon which the appeal court reached its decision were faulty.
All of them. Not just faulty, fundamentally faulted. With all respect, fundamentally faulted. From the lack of credible evidence to sustain the case, from reliance on hearsay evidence, from reliance for putting probative value on documents that they ought not to have, from relying only on card reader when there are cases of incident forms and manual registration where the card reader failed, without taking all this into consideration, from the abandonment of the case by the applicant himself, by the appellant himself, who had his own case and say, I'm no longer interested.
Okay.
From the evidence, from the fact that the star witnesses, one Mr. Nweke,
sorry,
when they said, in fact, let me make another point here.
Chief, sorry, I have
Abia and Dr. Oti at a time, just a second, let me just make this point, I'm sorry. Dr. Oti and Agba had also filed a preliminary issue which went on appeal to the Court of Appeal, which was that they were not given enough time to prove their case. They said, we have not been given enough time to prove our case. We therefore want the tribunal to recall some other witnesses. The Court of Appeal agreed with the tribunal that they were tardy in the presentation of their case, and they, with their own dereliction of duty, that there was nothing the Court of Appeal could do. They dismissed their cross appeal. They dismissed that appeal or that preliminary point. But the same Court of Appeal now relied on the same evidence of one Nweke, a collation officer, whom they themselves have said could not have witnessed all the votes cast in polling units.
Oh yes, Chief, you were explaining, I mean, you've already said that you fault the judgment of the Court of Appeal, but in your earlier explanation, you also were saying that the elections were emotive, and that's why a lot of people, you believe it would seem from the explanations that you gave that the PDP candidate would have carried the day. What you did not explain was why the votes were so close and why the other set of people who voted for the Abia candidate could also have been emotional about it.
Oh, of course. Certainly. That is why I started by giving the demographical setup of the area. That's why I said the entire case is highly emotive. So a lot of political sentiments are generated.
What are the
on
emotions?
either side.
What are the emotions what are the emotions? Sorry, beg your pardon, Chief. But what are the emotions that you think the supporters of Abga would have brought to these elections?
Well, so far, I have tried to look at the judgment. I have not really seen it other than political emotions or sentiments. For example, let me give you another example. A card reader report. It reports accreditation, word by word. Word by word. Now, to determine overvoting, it has to be polling unit by polling unit. There are 458 polling units that were in dispute. 458 polling units. I give you the example like this. In a ward, there may be 10 polling units in a ward. Polling unit 1, polling unit 2, polling unit 3 may have been infested with the virus of overvoting. But what the Court of Appeal did by juxtaposing the card reader report with Form EC 8C instead of Form EC 8A from the local polling unit is to criminalize and penalize a whole ward which may have 10 polling units, even though only one polling unit may have erred. So that is why it is better to take it back to polling unit by polling unit when you are talking about overvoting, not ward by ward or local government by local government, which the Court of Appeal used of Obingwa, Isialangwa North, and Osisioma. So with all respect, they missed it there. They were looking at the larger picture without looking at the connecting issues. The chain is as strong as the link. If
Now
you break that little tiny rope tying the chain or the beads, the rest goes into smithereens. So you cannot begin to use local government where you ought to use polling units. That is another major, with all respect, fundamental error. And thank God, what is beautiful about our democracy is that in a hierarchy of courts, you have appellate jurisdictions. And like I always say, democracy is not a 100 meters quick dash race of Hussein Bolt or John Benson or Ben Johnson. It is a marathon race that requires patience of competing centripetal and centrifugal forces. So the super court is waiting, called the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court itself has said, look, we are a super court. We are the final court. Our judgment is final. It is not final because we are infallible. We are infallible because it is final. So when at the end of the day you are not satisfied with judgment of the Supreme Court, then you can only appeal to God.
Well, Chief, you do feel, just the moment, because we're fast running out of time now. You do feel that your analysis here will be vindicated in the Supreme Court, although you must remember that what you're analyzing here is the appeal court judgment. Well, that's on the one hand. Looking at the local governments.
I could only analyze it because it has been decided.
Okay, looking at the local governments that are affected here and the analysis you gave earlier about emotions, do you not think that there could have been instances of overvoting in the process of trying to please a candidate?
Whether I perceive that there could have been
overvoting as a result of the analysis you gave earlier.
A court of appeal is an appellate court. It's not the court of first instance, which was the election petition tribunal, which saw the evidence and heard the witnesses viva voce and even watched their demeanor. So usually an appellate court is not allowed to substitute its own views for what a lower court saw. So the lower court did not see that. The tribunal dismissed the petition and felt that Dr. Oti and Abga did not have a genuine case.
All right.
The Court of Appeal said, no, you are wrong.
Well,
that is why I'm saying that the final court of the law, the Supreme Court, is waiting there. And I had analyzed here in November last year that the Taraba judgment by the Election Petition Tribunal was wrong. And the entire points I made here were actually upheld by the Court of Appeal, with all respect. I also believe that in this case, because I'm not in politics, because I'm not a politician, because I'm not in PDP, APC, ABGA, Labour Party, or any of the other parties, I can afford to analyze issues objectively within the limited knowledge of law and within my good conscience in what I believe is right or is wrong, objectively, without sentiments, without any sentiments attached at all.
Chief Michael Ozekhome,
That is
Senior
the difference
Advocate
between
of
me and some
Nigeria.
analysts.
Well, Chief Michael Ozekhome, SAN, thank you for talking to us today. All right, we'll be back in a minute. Don't go away.